Hi guys. So I thought we would talk about tomatoes today and the differences between determinate and indeterminate. And actually there's only one main difference, and so I will go over that. A determinate tomato is a tomato plant that will set all of its fruit basically in one set amount of time. Like it might be 3 weeks, it might be 4 weeks, but after it sets all of its fruit in those 2, 3 to 4 weeks, then your plant is going to die. And that's a very sad thing, but it's just the way that determinate tomatoes are. And so when people want to do a lot of canning, they will usually grow these determinate tomatoes, because when you're canning, you don't want to have a tomato every other day or whatever, because that's not very conducive to canning up large amounts of fruit. And so they will grow something like this Rutgers, which will give them, maybe 20 tomatoes within 2 or 3 days rather than 1 or 2 tomatoes within 2 or 3 days. And so with this type of tomato, you just want to let it go. There's really no reason to prune out any of the extra branches or anything like that, because anything extra that you're taking off, you're just taking that away from the plant. And because it only has a set amount of fruit available, then it would be counterproductive to actually take out anything or prune it or whatever. And so with this type of determinate tomato, you just leave it alone and you let it grow and you let it do its thing. Now, I actually put my Rutgers in these Texas tomato cages specifically because I'm not going to be pruning them. I'm not going to be taking these suckers out. I'm just going to let them go. And so I wanted to make sure that I had a nice big sturdy cage, and so that it could just do what it wants to do. And it's already looking quite a bit bigger than it was just yesterday, so that's pretty cool. And so this is my one Rutgers, and this is another Rutgers. And then especially for these veggie cages, I wanted to make sure that I was planting my indeterminate tomatoes in these guys, because when you do indeterminate tomatoes, you can easily train them to be a single stem. And I already pinched off the suckers on that one, so I'll have to show you on this one if I can find him. Yeah, he's got some suckers in here. But with the indeterminate tomatoes, if you can train them to one basic single stem, then most of its growth will stay right there to its stem, and it'll grow upwards, and that's where its energy will go, is upwards and to these main branches right here. And an indeterminate tomato will keep producing tomatoes, maybe one tomato every day or every other day, until the frost kills it. And so these types of tomatoes are best for people who want a fresh, steady supply of tomatoes throughout the whole growing season, because it'll just keep going and going until the frost kills it. But if you want to train it to be a little bit more manageable, then you will go through and you'll take out the suckers. Now this is the main stem right here, and then this is a secondary branch right here, and so is this one. So all of these secondary branches is where your fruit is going to bear. And so obviously you want to leave these big boys on there. But then if you look really closely, soon after you transplant them, you'll start seeing these little tiny branches coming out in the crotch of this main stem and that secondary branch right there. And this is called a sucker. And so when you are growing indeterminate tomatoes, if you want most of the energy to stay into these secondary branches here, you want to prune out these suckers. And now is actually the best time to do that, because they're young and they're tender, and you can go through with your fingers and just pinch that out very easily, and it does no harm to the plant. Now if you were to wait and that sucker was maybe like this tall, then that's not so healthy for the plant to take it out then, and it's kind of hard to actually just pinch it out. But it's obviously still possible, but you might have to take your pruners and go in there and do a very careful cut of that sucker that comes out of there. And so it's best to catch them when they're very small like this. And so here's another one there I can show you. See, he's right there. That's the main stem, and that's the secondary branch that the fruit's going to grow on. And so that thing growing right out of the crotch, that's your sucker. And so you just take it between your two fingers and pull it out, just like that. Really easy to do when they're babies like this. And I definitely wouldn't want to try to do this on big suckers. So it's best just to come out, you know, like once a day. As you're checking your plants and watering them or whatever, just look them over and see if there's any little suckers. There's another one right there. And see how easy that comes off? It's just really easy, and it doesn't hurt the plant at all. And in all of my veggie cages, I've put indeterminate tomatoes, and that actually I only have 2 determinate tomatoes, and they're both Rutgers, so I put them in the Texas tomato cages. And then I put my indeterminates everywhere else. Well, I mean, because that's all I have. But let's see if these have any suckers. They do not. I planted these guys out about 1 or 2 days after the first batch, so they're not quite as tall, and they don't have suckers yet. So there's nothing to do to these guys right now. And I think what I'm going to do is experiment with them, because what I have here in the center, I have the Pantano Romanesco, the Italian heirloom. I actually have 3 of those, and so I put 2 of them in the veggie cages and 1 in my Texas tomato cage. So what I think I might do, just as an experiment, is to train these 2 that are in the veggie cages to be single stems, because this veggie ring is actually, or excuse me, veggie cage. It looks like a ring, kind of. So they're very skinny. I mean, the column is just really skinny, so I'm definitely going to train these to single stem. But then on this Pantano Romanesco, I think I'm going to leave it alone and not prune it, because there's, you know, everybody has different taste and everything, and there's a lot of people who say, oh, just leave your tomato plants alone, it's not going to hurt them or whatever, and some people who are growing in small spaces say you have to train them to a single stem and whatever, you know. So we're just going to experiment, and I think I'm going to leave this Pantano Romanesco alone to its own devices, and when it starts getting suckers, I'm not going to prune them out, but I will prune them out on these 2, and so we'll see what happens on these guys. Okay, so I hope that helped to answer any questions you might have about indeterminate versus determinate, and just let me know if you have any questions and I'll try to help you. See ya.